Good evening, everyone. We are so excited to be live tonight for the Black intellectualism movement conversation on the Devil's Punch Bowl and other stories about the history of Natchez, Mississippi. I'm really excited tonight. I'm so excited. I kind of don't even know where to begin. I've been like a kid in a candy shop ever since I got this confirmation phone call from Miss Jarita King. As many of you all know, last month or during the month of February, um, I shared a video on TikTok about the Devil's Punch Bowl, which was really just because if you know me, you know I'm very into Black history and Black culture. As a teacher of 13 years, I've always integrated Black history into the classroom. And since I've left the classroom, social media has become my even larger version of the teaching teaching classroom. So really just sharing something that I was having a chance to learn in hopes that this would also enlighten other people. Upon sharing it on TikTok, the clips about the Devil's Punch Bowl went viral, and so far we're at about 700,000 views and well over 250,000 reactions and comments. It has also sparked other people to get more involved in talking about Black history and Black culture. And people were so adamant about knowing more that they have asked questions like, how can we get the landmark in Natchez where the Devil's Punch Bowl was located to honor the people who were victimized? How can we learn more about Natchez? How can we learn more about what happened in regards to the history there? They really put me to work. And the problem is when you ask me a question, as a teacher and a writer, I am determined to get the answer for you. So I decided to look up the Natchez NAACP, and I honestly did not know what would happen, but I saw that they had an active page and had been making posts. So I said, let me send a message. And lo and behold, Miss Jarita King literally responded within minutes. She has no idea how dramatic I was acting on the other side of the computer when she responded, but I was really cutting up. I was like, oh my goodness, somebody responded. And she was instantly receptive and interested in sharing stories about Natchez with me. And since then, we've had several opportunities to talk. We've talked about Natchez. We've talked about life. We have also had the chance to connect on TikTok. Not the way that I hope we get to, which is face to face in the future, but we have had the chance to do a little talking and sharing even on there. And so we talked about when it would be possible for her to come on and share, and then she shared with me that her father was open to coming on to share stories with us as well. I was really cutting up then. She doesn't know me, but I'll start crying in a minute. So I was crying in the background like, oh my goodness, it's about to go down. And for those of you who know me, you know I'm very passionate about the culture and our people and showing love and support and even connecting with our folks. So I get moved about it when we get the chance to connect and share stories. So we've just been waiting, of course, with the pandemic and just connecting with people unexpectedly. You kind of have to figure out how, when, and where you can do things because Miss Jarita is a very busy woman and Mr. Joe is a very busy man. And so they did definitely carve out time to be here with us tonight. So I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time continuing to talk because you all know that I will. I'm going to instead go ahead and share their biographies with you and, of course, reintroduce myself, and we're going to get down to the conversation. Mr. Billy Joe Frazier is a class of 1969 graduate of Sadie Victoria Thompson High School. He is alumni of Jackson State University. He is a Navy vet. He is the retired police lieutenant of 32 years from the Natchez, Mississippi Police Department. He is Alderman of Ward 2, a lifetime member of the Natchez NAACP, and a member of the Wallace Jackson Elks Lodge. Miss Jarita Frazier King is a community activist, and if you haven't been to her page yet, I'm going to tag in a little while. And she is really not only an activist but a service woman. And she had me a little shook up last month when she was out making sure the senior citizens of the community were getting taken care of. So she's a woman of her word. She is a graduate of Alcorn State University, owner of the Natchez Heritage School of Cooking, which we will get the chance to talk about. founder of the Southwest Wellness Association of Mississippi, which is her nonprofit, and the first vice president of the Natchez branch of the NAACP and a lifetime member. Her father is a part of the boomer generation, and she is Generation X. So I'm so thankful and excited and blessed and honored that they are here. I see you all are already coming into the room, dropping your comments. If you have any questions during the discussion, please share them by any means. And so we can share these questions with them as well. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get down to business. And Mr. Joe, Jarita, is there anything you'd like to share with me before we get into the conversation?
Yes, I would just want to say one thing. I'm also a member of the NBC Leo and Mississippi National Black Caucus, local elected officials.
Awesome. Yes, sir. So
Okay.
he holds, and I want to commend, I was looking at just how many positions you all hold within the community and how active and involved you are. And I think that speaks volumes as well about the culture and history of Mississippi, seeing African Americans hold such important positions and fulfill them. So thank you for sharing all of that. I'm excited. So I guess I want to start off by asking you all to share more with us, or even share the beginning of what kind of got us together, which is the Devil's Punch Bowl.
Uh, okay. Let me first let me say this to the people that are listening. I want to say well, I'm just going to say welcome you to Natchez. Natchez, Mississippi is the oldest settlement on the Mississippi River. We are 2 years older than New Orleans, and so that's really set us apart. When we was and this settlement Natchez was founded by, well, not founded, but its first was by the Natchez Indians who first settled in this area. Then later on, the French came, the English, the Spanish, and later on, up under the United States of America. So, and then, as you know, we as Black folks, then we really had a whole hand in building Natchez, what making it is today. Uh, as now we'll get back to the Devil's Punch Bowl, which is it's located off of Cemetery Road, Natchez, Mississippi. They call it the Devil's Punch Bowl because at one time in history, it was a concentration camp. Now let me say this: it was ran by the Union soldiers who ran it. And what they did, they sectioned it off in two sections. They had the slaves, the men's, they had them in one section. They had the women and children in the next section. In the next section. And what they did, they had the slaves doing all the work, and it was building something, doing whatever they needed to do. But on the other hand, they really was starving them to death and stuff. Now, these was Union soldiers. These were not Confederate soldiers. These was Union soldiers. So as you know, after the Emancipation Proclamation, what transpired, during the Civil War, they freed the slaves. The slaves started following the Union soldiers because they felt that everything was comfortable, and that's why they got to this point in Natchez. Because everywhere the Union soldiers went, they had a large uh, following of slaves. Because, like I said earlier, that's where they felt. But the Devil's Punch Bowl, it was notorious, known as a notorious concentration camp for slaves and stuff. Like I say, it was a lot of atrocities did to our people. They was killing women and children in that area, and it's today. If you come today, it's no markers or anything down there, but you can look down in that area and see. And the strange thing about it too is the Devil's Punch Bowl is now located almost in the vicinity next to the National Cemetery, and we got a Natchez Cemetery
Very
right around the
beautiful
corner.
cemetery.
And, and you can go around the corner and you'll be in the National Cemetery. And then, like I said, it's strange because that's where a lot of our Black soldiers are buried from the World War II, the Korean War, and on through. So it's strange, but this is one part of history that people don't want to talk about, especially people that don't look like us. They really don't want to hear. And so much about history that has been denied to us because they really don't want to tell it. So that is one aspect of Natchez that I can talk to you about the Devil's Punch Bowl.
I wanted to share one of the things that Jarita and I talked about was the lack of a plan for the people after they were freed. And one of the things that I find that tends to be problematic is when we talk about Black history, people like to discuss it as a separate entity of American history. And so I had several people trying to question what we know for sure is valid. And I started sharing some articles with them that were not just about the Devil's Punch Bowl, but that were about where America was at that point, and the fact that Mississippi had broken away from the United States. And basically, we're talking about the Civil War where they're fighting about slavery. And Mississippi itself was already suffering financially because they had broken away, which means your money value has greatly declined. They were having to grow their own crops instead of shipping them back and forth. And then on top of that, I was reading that that there was basically famine and disease had set in. And so I looked at people like, and the whole reason is basically because of freeing the slaves. So in what sense do you think that the people of Mississippi would care about what happens to these folks now? And I was reading where basically the time it would have taken to get these 20,000 slaves up the Mississippi or even around through the Gulf and around the Atlantic to safety, I mean, would have taken so much. In a sense, it makes me feel like when you talk about Mr. Joe, when you talk about how, you know, these were Union soldiers, there was never really a plan for them anyway. So it was like, get it how you live. We freed you, at least that, you know, hey, we did that
Let,
for you.
let me address something that you just said.
Yes, sir.
You was talking about how the slaves got there. Now, let me say this: Natchez also is known, which is known to have the second largest slave market in the United States. Not in the United States, in the South and Southwest, because most of the slaves came in at the port. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it's Charleston. They came all the way. They came to Charleston. They came all the way to Natchez. They were slow. They were sold as slaves. It was a thriving market because from what from what I can understand and gather, it was the slave owners around here that was selling slaves. They originally was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I can't think of their name right now, but they ran a lucrative slave market. They were selling. You had kids that might go for $200 or $300, or you might have adults going for 1,000. That's what we was their property. That's how they sold us. And that
Mm-hmm.
right now today, we have a gentleman here. Name Mr. Boxer, Bad Boxley. We are in the process now, and along with the federal government and the state of Mississippi and the citizen, both black and white and citizen Natchez, we are in the process get the Natchez slave market, that area. We are going to put that area on the national register, whereby it could be open to everyone in America and across the world to see exactly what slavery was and what it did to this nation and what it did to our people. And if you come to Natchez right now, it's a marker that you might see. If your name is Smith, you might see on the register there someone named Smith. It's a possibility that as I speak, and everyone is listening, that some of your relatives came through Natchez as a slave, and you're on that register. So if you come to Natchez, like I say, it's on St. Catherine in Road. It's a marker there. It's got a placard there with a lot of people's names, Smith, Jones, and they say where they came from. They might have came from Virginia. They might have came from South Carolina and everything. Now, another good if I tell the people, if you ever get a chance to go to the National Museum in Washington, D.C., you'll see Natchez in that museum. And it tells you about the slave market in Natchez. It also goes out in details and telling you about the slave market. It tells you about, and I was stunned myself because I didn't know anything about it. It tells you about a revolt that took place called the Samba, S-A-M, I think S-A-M-B-A, Samba revolt. It happened in 17. If I'm not sure. I'm not going to It happened in 1732. It's where the Natchez Indians and the slaves revolted against the slave masters. They revolted. They started killing all the slave plantations. And at that time, when it was one slave, his name was Samaba, and he was a slave from Africa. When he was in Africa, he was causing a revolt in Africa. So what they did, they shipped him from Africa on a slave ship, and on the
1732.
yeah 1730, and on the slave ship he was causing problems then on the slave ship. But when he got to when he was causing a revolt, but when he got to America, he was sold as a slave. He got to America, but his slave owner, the plantation owner, he thought that was his right hand man, but really he was the one. See, our people's always have been smart. We always been smart, but he was the one that really carried on the revolt. And as I stated earlier, after the Sambo revolt, the slave owners became kind of leery of what's going on. So and also, what happened in this instance, the Salmon Revolt, I think that's where they wiped out all the Natchez Indian tribes and it killed a lot of slaves and stuff. Called the Salmon Revolt. So, we always been people that have been pressed for the last 400 years. So, as I say, there's a lot of history in Natchez, and we also the home of the during the Reconstruction. We sent the first black Congressman, Senator Hiram Rebel and John R. Lynch, which is John R. Lynch. They named Lynch Street. That's where they named the street after him in Jackson, Mississippi. Lynch Street was named after John R. Lynch. And like I say, and we have
which he was a slave here in Natchez at Dunleavy Plantation. And he was self-educated here in Natchez and later on went to our U.S. Congress.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting statement you made because I have some friends who have the last name Lynch that are from Winsboro, which is down the street from you all.
Yeah,
I'm going to ask them if they know anything. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They more than likely are related because John R. Lynch's mother came over from Tacony Plantation, which was in Louisiana, in that area. And so his father was a biracial man. His father was a white man. And so they later came over to Natchez and dwelled at Dunleavy Plantation.
Wow.
So it's very likely that they are related.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I find it interesting. So a couple of different things that passed through my mind as you were talking. Number one, I wanted to go back just for a minute to the Devil's Punch Bowl to talk about the peaches. Because when I shared the story about the peaches, people in the comments said all kinds of stuff.
Well, that's like this strange fruit,
everybody made reference to that.
The strange fruit. Well, of course, wherever you would have caucuses and different things, it was fertile ground. They made some of the best fertilizer, and there's rumored to be why it is so fertile, and they grow some of the biggest peaches. But I think people dare not to eat them around here.
Well, and that's what they were definitely talking about, how people don't eat them. And this one lady was like, it was so interesting because she said, I was talking about the plantation, how these beautiful plantation homes line the street, and they basically sit on the back of a grave of bodies. And it just, when we were riding through, it angered me so much to see how people have capitalized off the burdens and the pains of other people and just disregard it. And it reminds me that it's not just in Natchez that this happened, but throughout our country. So it's kind of like every time you go through yet another piece of history where you can physically see where this happened, it's a reminder that this happens everywhere. And some of the people were saying things like, we should bake pies out of the peaches and send them to their descendants and all types of things. And I was, I had to share that because I was laughing so hard. I mean, people had some really creative things to say, but it just really struck them to know that, these bodies had fertilized this land, and that people were basically still making a profit, off the housing and things like that in that area. And even more so, There was a lady who actually said her and her husband had just stayed in one of the bed and breakfasts, and she was like, I didn't know anything about this. Then she came back in a second coming and said, wait, he was downstairs talking to the front desk and somebody told him about it, but she never, she didn't know until that moment. And so I want to ask you all as well, how do you feel about the fact that there is this beautiful, and I passed by the cemetery. I was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a cemetery this immaculate. I came in as, a visitor, as a person who's learning, as people who live there, what kind of thoughts have crossed your mind? And I know over the years you kind of just get adjusted to it because it's just there. Not saying that it makes it okay with you, but it's there. How do you feel knowing that, these beautiful, pieces of property sit in this area where we really don't hear about the history as much?
Houses. How do you feel about it?
You're talking about some of the slaves' houses.
Yes, sir. The plantation homes and things that sit on the land where many of the bodies are buried.
We have so many around here. I think we have more plantations than anybody in the state. And,
there are a lot.
Because, well, to be honest, and my mother and them and my grandmother and them, they always tell about what plantation they came off. My mother, because she used to tell me, well, all your folks came off plantation. They called it the Grove. A lot of slaves really didn't know the name of the plantation, but they just give it a, they call it the Grove Plantation, which is located, I think, about 5 or 10 miles outside the city of Natchez in the Kingston area. And my grandmother used to tell me a lot of different things about our foreparents, what they went through, what they did, and how they had to. My grandmother used to tell me, she said, during our people really couldn't eat pork. Now, you talk about pork, our people really didn't eat pork until the 4th of July. We ate black, what they call it, smut cakes or bread, whatever. But my grandmother was telling me about how their grandmother and their granddad at night, they'd go into the to the back to the house, and they had to kill one of the hogs. And after they killed the hogs, they had at night. They did all this at nighttime. They couldn't do it in the daytime because they was in the field. They'll get the hog and kill the hog and salt it down, cure it, and put it on the plank on the board in the house. And so that's how they survived because it was just hard for our peoples, and we are peoples who know how to improvise, and we can survive. We have survived for 400 and something years. My sister, I'm telling you, we are some resilient people.
Yes.
We are known to make it. We're gonna make it. And like I say, it was just stories that you hear for years and years. Like, and one story she told me that I really wanted to research, but I never really researched because she was telling me about one of her brother-in-law who was a Mandingo slave. He was. They say his name was Michael, and he was double jointed, whatever. They used to cut tree stumps. This happened next. They was cutting tree stumps on the plantation. But the old slave master used to do him like a dog and mistreat him, everything. So they was cutting trees down. They seen him coming, and they waited till he got there, almost to the tree, and they cut the tree down. The tree fell down and killed him. The horse went back to the house. After he went back to the house, they took his body and threw it in the fire and burned him up. And they never did find out what happened. My grandmother told me, like, come on, Mom. She said, that's what happened. But history, it's just it's just a lot of history around here, and we're just really getting into it and learning about ourselves because I was telling you about the Samurai Revolt. I just really found out that after I went to the National Museum, and that been about 7, 8 years ago about the Samurai Revolt. So our history always been suppressed from us. We try to keep it down.
I have a different perspective, or for as with me, you know, I've heard a lot of stories, you know, that have been passed down from my dad, my grandmother, and you know, others in our family. But every time I go to a plantation home, after the feeling of sadness, I more have a sense of pride. For me, it's more of look what we did. This would not be here. This structure would not be standing. Found out doing some research that a lot of the beautiful columns and artwork that's on a lot of the plantation homes was intricate details that were done by women. And so I come from a large family on my mom's side with 14 children, 10 women, and 4 boys. And so for me, it's the pride for me that I feel. And every time I get the opportunity, we talk to people, they'll say, I don't want to go in those houses. It makes me so mad to go into them. And you can, whenever you go into them, you can feel the ancestors' presence. It's a feeling of, I just can't explain it. When they say it's in your DNA, you really feel the ancestors there. And after you get over that point, like I said, it's a sense of pride. You know, they tell me I do the heritage cooking school. They said, girl, I wouldn't go in them plantation homes, you know, why you wear them mammy clothes, you know, and I say, I don't wear mammy clothes. It's not a game for me. I wear African regalia, royalty clothing, because I know that I had ancestors that were there in that home working, who were not able to be themselves, who were not able to have a sense of pride, a sense of culture. They were there as domestic, you know, slaves. And I like to focus a lot on the lives of the people who live in the house, as well as we hear a lot about what went on outside of the house. But the stories, man, if the walls could talk, or what probably went on inside of the houses. So it's very interesting for me. Like I said, my dad is a local historian. He has so much information as a policeman. You know, the stories of people that he's known. This is something that we've always, in a sense, sat down and had these kitchen table combos and talk about stuff. And you know, we've had, you know, all the way from slavery, massacres, mass killings, to our, you know, civil rights era. Natchez has a lot of, shall lack of word to say, horror that has happened. However, like he said, we're still a resilient people. You know, the Black people in the community. I think we had our, you know, our last mayor that said the treasure of Natchez are the people of Natchez, and I truly, you know, believe that if it was not for, you know, the ancestors, and every chance I get, I try to pay homage to the ancestors. Forks of the Road is an experience. I challenge anybody, if you can
So
ever
hold
get down.
on, 'cause I want you to talk about Forks in the Road. So I want to interject for just a minute, because then I want you to actually tell us about Forks in the Road, because that's one of the main reasons I'm coming back. And along with a list of other things. But I want to say this. You and Mr. Joe just said a whole mouthful of things. Number one being, we are people that know how to improvise and survive, and we are known to make it. And I share that so often because we still struggle to see our people in a positive light because of the hundreds of years that we were conditioned to believe we were useless. And so to hear an elder share that wisdom with us and to say it is so important, because our people need to understand that surviving life in America was not a cakewalk. And here we are generations later, still managing to break glass ceilings every day. So that was an amazing statement. What you said about when you go to the antebellum homes and you see the beautiful architecture, and that so much of it was designed by women, that component of it is new for me as well, because I did always wonder, like, how I knew more than likely our people built them, but I always wondered who designed them. And so thinking about, so many times we're trying to figure out where our gifts and talents come from, and I always talk about how I said, they threw us in the fields and said, you're going to be slaves. And we just had to figure out how to make things easier on ourselves. And then we went on to invent almost everything this country has. Almost everything this country has, and many things that our people still don't get credit for. And so when you make the statement that it is painful when you go there, but then you get a sense of pride when you think about the fact that our people did this. We made this. This place stands because of us. I share that same sentiment with you. Because that's absolutely the feelings we should have. And that's one reason that I can't stop digging. I can't stop learning. I don't feel I ever know enough. Every news story is an important story. And so when you made that statement, I was like, I fully agree with you on that. And I think that that's an amazing statement to make. I want to transition on because I hope we get to talk a little bit about civil rights as well. But before we get there, I would like for us to talk about forks in the road, because I think that's a passionate point to you too. Because you talked to me about forks in the road more than one time. So I want us to talk about that as well. And I'm going to turn the mic back over to you all.
We let me say this. We have talked about the forks of the road. I just got to telling y'all that the forks of the road is where about in that area on St. Catherine and Liberty Road. That is where they had the slave auction at, and I was stated earlier. Majority of the peoples in the United States, probably in this area, came in that exact area. That's where you will find your family history at, right up there at the forks of the road. And I stated earlier.
Oh, so that's what a list of names would be.
That's it. That is where the federal government, the National Park Service, not the local, but the National Park Service, and along with Mr. Boxley, Mr. Bag Boxley, and I'm gonna give credit to one of our Vanilla sisters. She's working with Kathleen Barnes. She's employed with the National Park Service. They're doing a wonderful job. They've been working on this for years, getting this up and where about they're gonna have a building there and everything showing about slavery. They're gonna have, I would say, like videos informing our peoples of what's going on. But let me say this to you, and to the people that listen. The Forks of the Road is going to be one of the premier visitation sites in America. As of today and right now, we have people that come to visit, both white and black. They're not too much interested in looking at old homes anymore. They want to know what happened in slavery, where the slaves are. Now when they come, the first place they want to come is to the Forks of the Road. And that's what they're coming for. And I talk to a lot of people because in Natchez we have in case the audience didn't know, we have steamboats come in from New Orleans cruise line. They have like 2 or 3 cruise line come in like once or twice a week. With what the city government's working on getting. Yeah, we have steamboats coming in. They have cruises coming up from New Orleans all the way up to St. Louis, Memphis, and up and Vicksburg, stopping Vicksburg, other historical places, St. Francisville, Louisiana, Baton Rouge, and they're telling the history. But like I say, when you come to Natchez, you're gonna get the full brunt of the history and everything that transpired. But as I say, the Forks of the Road is where about the people. That's where they want to go and see. And I advise anybody if you ever come to Natchez, come and just come to the Forks of the Road. You might say, well, ain't nothing here now, but we're gonna have something. You might look at the list, you might start crying. You say to myself, Lord, this is where my people come from. This is where they were sold as slaves and whatever, all throughout the United States. That's what they.
So for me, like Dan said earlier, you'll find a lot of slaves in that route of travel is what's so important in that Atlantic slave trade route. Seeing the slaves where they actually came in Jamestown and in South Carolina to move over across the land and come down. What we have today is the Natchez Trace. That Natchez Trace line of travel is so important. They will bring slaves down and bring them around to the ports here in Mississippi. They would then dock at the ports get off, and they would bring people around the outskirts of town, and you would see Mama Plantation home is still there, and they would bring them up to what is standing today. It was a holding pen for the slaves, and the actual slave trading block is across the street, kind of where it is today. It's kind of all grown up, but they're working on restructuring it. But that area there was the way that they brought slaves in around the outskirts of town, so they wouldn't have to march them through the middle of town, and then to come there to be weighed to be sold the next day. They have pictures there to show you how they dress slaves up, and how they made auctioned them off. But a lot of those things also too came culture, and that's what a lot of what I focus on, the creations that we have out of slavery today, what we call classic Southern soul food, came out of the slave area, out of necessity. Like Dad said, we were not always unhealthy eaters. When before we came, we ate free range. We ate, good food. We ate a lot of vegetables, more of a plant-based diet. So it really spoke to the constitute of the health of African Americans for me, making that trip over here. If you can imagine having to be on the boat for over a month, they're traveling. And they brought things, like okra and all these things with them. Some of these traditions, one of the known traditions that we still have today that would have came with people that came here into the United States from the forks of the road, is the tradition we still celebrate of having our black eyed peas and collard greens for New Year's as a sign of our heritage and culture. But Forks of the Road, like I said, was the second largest slave trading post here in the South before New Orleans was even, a thought. They actually left Natchez to discover New Orleans. So we have a very similar history to New Orleans. Still today, they have plantation homes right across the river. We were a very agriculturalist area at the time. But one of the most infamous stories we have about Forks of the Road is a slave that was brought in called Prince Ibrahim. Prince Ibrahim was a slave from Timba in Africa, and he was brought here to Natchez. He was actually sold off by some of his rival tribesmen who were, upset with him, and they sold
Hold
him
on,
off.
pause 1 minute, and I'm gonna let you finish, because what you said is such an important point. Because I get absolutely frustrated with, especially honestly speaking, from a lot of white people who say, "Well, Africans sold their own people," and I have to say, first of all, Africa's a continent. And just like America is America is a continent that consists of Canada, United States, and Mexico. And if we want to say that Africans sold their own people, well, let's just say that Americans blocked their own people from getting into this country, because it's all the same continent. So by clarifying that these are tribes and races and cultures, this is a huge learning point that people need to listen to and receive. And I want to thank you for sharing that. Like, that's a huge learning nugget. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate that point. But go ahead.
That was one of the main things too that was noticed about African Americans, was our industrialness and our way of development of what we were doing. That was watched by travelers, and these were English, settlers who watched these way that we operated and worked, and they were already trading, you know, um, slaves and going on. Slavery didn't start here in America. And people need to realize that slavery was going on way before they brought us over here. But just looking at, like I said, the prince was brought here, and he had a person who was there, a hunter who was a friend of one of the tribes. His father was a king, and he noticed him because he had an accident when he was younger with his eye, and he had a messed up eye, and he recognized him at the market. Natchez, even though we had the slavery component, it still at one point was a kind of a progressive industrial place. Not that it was right, but we've always had a very industrial, history. They allowed him to then his slave owner, Thomas Foster. He fought a long time not to be a slave, but once he finished, fighting, he gave up. He started to be one of the most prized, or one of the best slaves that Thomas Foster had. He was there at Foster Plantation, which is still here in Natchez, still standing. Thomas Foster had the prince, like I said again, we were industrial people, farmers. He showed him how to grow potatoes. And so they were a potato farmer. And all the things that he grew, he taught all of the other slaves how to grow. And then he allowed him on Sundays to go to market. And that market was still down there at the port, on that line of travel that I talked about. But he was recognized by this man, and he asked him what was he doing here. And he told him he was in slavery here in the United States. And the man went to petition Thomas Foster to get his freedom, which he denied him. But he fought all of his life, just to make a long story short, he eventually did get his freedom. He petitioned even the government to get his freedom. He got back to Africa, but he was unable to get all of his people back to Africa. And some of those people of his family are still here today. It's the Foster family. And others, they're still here today. We have a African American museum called the NAACP Museum, which is it's not a very big building, but it would take you weeks to go through there to really see all the information. But the story of the princess there, I find myself to be blessed to have my own family tree there in the Museum of Free Negroes of Color that lived here during the Reconstruction time. So, there's some stories that people are sitting on. My main goal is to be the teller of my own story. I do not feel as though people should make money off telling my story. It's mine, and I should be able to tell it. And that's a lot of what I do at the Heritage Cooking School. I tell stories on a plate, but I mix in our own culture of the city and a lot of personal stories of people that I know here in Natchez. But that's the story of the forks of the road. A lot of history. Is a lot of roots that still run deep here. But I'm gonna let Dad kind of segment you into the civil rights, because he was a policeman during that time.
And that's what I was wondering. Okay, okay.
Let me say this before we go on to the next comment. In the early 1800s, as my daughter just stated, Natchez was more of agriculture than that. The Natchez had more millionaires than anybody per capita in the United States.
King was
Cotton was king. We had more millionaires than anybody in the whole United States.
I saw a gentleman. There's a gentleman who said cotton was king because it was fertile by the river, and he was saying that there were rich black people there in Natchez as well, which I have heard, which Jarita has shared with me before, that you did have wealthy black people in
that gentleman. That gentleman is exactly right. Matter of fact, that gentleman is our kinfolks. He stayed in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hey, kinfolk.
That was our kinfolk. Yeah, so he's a minister, and plus he's not a millennial. He's along with my daughter. So yeah,
Hey, Brian.
So he's very. Anybody from Natchez can basically tell you the history of Natchez.
So let me ask you a question. When we talk about black people being wealthy, and Jarita even brought this up to me before about how there were wealthy black people as well who owned slaves. So I would like for you to tell us a little bit about that. And then I think my question becomes as well, because one of the things we often know is that many times they got into the market because they were like, well, if anybody's going to own my people, it's going to be me, and things like that. And so, I can deal with this differently. My question is, do you think that black people who were enslaved under some of the black slave masters were treated less harshly? So I wanted to ask you that question.
Well, like I say, it was quite a few blacks that around here that owned slaves, and I'm not going to call it names. But some of the families, the prominent black families, are still around here.
Wow.
But let me say, if you visit the NAACP Museum in Natchez, they have pictures which was taken down through the years by Dr. Gandy. I know a lot of photos in there by Dr. Gandy. This gentleman is Caucasian, but he kept a record of a lot of blacks, a lot of prominent black people, and a lot of things dealing with slavery. If you go into that museum, you will see our people was very, very educated people, and after they got so-called free, our people was very, very, and they was dressed very neat. But as you know, there still was, anywhere you go, there still was two kinds of slaves.
Okay. Yeah.
There still was the fake. There still was the field slave, and there still was the house slave. But to me, I consider some of those prominent blacks in that era as the ones that was more of in the house slave. But and they got up and they got educated, and so
they more domestic slaves. Yeah. They were not. We don't see as many records of they were having a lot of field slaves. There was more indentured servants, house domestic slave servitude. So you would call it. But I think I was telling you all too about the Barbers of Natchez, the story of the Barbers of Natchez. William Johnson, and you can visit the William Johnson house here in Natchez, and go through that museum. Is on the National Park Registry as well. And there were a lot of families here, unfortunately, there were biracial families. There were some of but my family, one of them. There were more of the people who were considered prominent African American families because they were mulattoes. They were just mulatto children. And you can, like I say, you can see a lot of their history there in the museum. And a lot of these families are still around here today. I have a running joke with a friend of mine, I call her sister, because she's Caucasian, but I always say, because they no telling we might be cousins around here. We had a lot of that here, in Natchez, and people more moved and lived on the outskirts of Natchez, but everybody knew, exactly what it was. Our family more moved out of what, and a lot of areas today is Jefferson County, but at one time it was all part of Adams County. Natchez is along the line of a lot of slave towns all up and down the Mississippi River, and you will see that same story. Vicksburg, you had a lot of families, and it was not uncommon, St. Franceville, for you to have family over at another plantation. Now, our issue was the tracking of it. As you know, that was one of the main goals to stop people from running away, was to change your name so that you wouldn't, run off to the neighboring plantation. I consider it a blessing to be able to have most of our family history. My dad can go back to his family roots and know where he came from, as well as my mom can do the same thing. And that's something a lot of people are not able to do in the world, is to say, I know who I am and I know where I come from. But that John Roy Lynch, his sister was married to William Johnson's son, and so there's a lot of social class that went on, married within your class to try to keep things. So Black people had some structure and things too that they would look at to be rankings of social classes and everything. And I think that created a lot of that for our culture, and we still had experienced a lot of that today in the Black community. And I think that that was the purpose of it, to divide us.
This is what we went through. If you can see, these are some of our folks.
This is an amazing photo.
Yeah, this picture here, I know is about 100 and some years old.
Oh,
but on Jarita mother's side, this picture come out of Jefferson County. It came out of old house, but we don't know who the person's name of. All we know is one of my wife's ancestors.
That's crazy.
And he is a mulatto.
He's mulatto.
I definitely can see that. And that's what you are doing today is, and first of all, let me say something. We have people posting pictures in the comments, We are going to answer the questions.
See it.
We're going to answer the questions at the end because you probably can't see those. I can see them. We'll answer the questions at the end. Some of them are about this directly. Some of them are about other parts of like that are related to it. So we'll come back to that. But showing that picture just made everything so real when we talk, like, to say we have this picture of this person. We don't know who he is. We just know he's family. You know, it shakes up your emotions in a different kind of way because it's the reality of so many of us that we can only trace it back so far. We have things that have been passed down to us. My mother has a blanket that's about 7 generations old from a grandmother that's named Mama Ghana, who was half Indian, half African.
So is it a story blanket?
I don't know if it's a story blanket, but it's knitted and it was stitched in patches from the old cotton that they like. Even the cotton in it is it's like a brown color, and it
come out the field. It come out the field. That's a boll weave.
And you know that a lot of the patterns and different things on them would tell stories to help you remember some of your culture.
It is definitely multi-pattern. And I asked her that, and I don't think she ever knew, but somehow my mother got the blanket, and over the years it's gotten really fragile. And so my mother has patched some places. And so I have already staked claim to it between me and my brother. I don't think he'd be that concerned.
The best thing to use would be some old yarn to kind of keep it together, not to hurt it, because it's kind of more like the fibers. But even things
one
like
of my cousins on here, she said she remembers it. Cousin Jackie, Mama she still has that blanket. She remembers it. So
and we find that those were ways that we held on to who we were. I come from a family consumer science and background and everything, but that was one of the ways. My dad have pots, my mom have things that we passed down, and a lot of times those were the only things that we had as family heirlooms.
Let me say something to you about that blanket and how our culture has got lost and how our language have got lost. People laugh, but you know what my mother used to say about that blanket. You know what they call a blanket?
What?
A kiver.
They call it a what now?
Kiver.
A kiver.
Give it up. They say cover it up. That's being covered up. That's what you mean with kiver.
Kiver.
Go give me the kiver.
Do you? Well, and see, now you go into a whole different thing, because I talk about linguistics and vernacular and the transition of language from trying to adapt to the English tongue.
Yeah, it's if you get somebody a little older, they might remember our culture, in our language that's been lost, and our people like say down south they always say you all. But see, that's part of our language, and kiver part, the kiver is the cover. My grandma say, "Go give it up for me." And I'm like, what she saying?
I love it.
People always talk about us and say, "Oh, y'all so country," but it's still a merging of cultures for us. When we talk, it's a merge of culture for us. It has been it has passed down from generation to generation, and we don't even realize it.
But here's another thing that but see, our kids are not aware, and we're not aware. But we try to correct it. When the kids say, "I ain't gonna do that." That was part of our culture. I ain't gonna. That was part of our language.
See, now y'all dancing in my arena big time now, because I'm an English teacher. So I study the vernacular very closely, and I always try to tell people, I hear people all the time try to associate slang with Black vernacular. And there's a big difference. And I try to tell people, please don't let folks water down Black vernacular and the transfer of language from our people to this street slang. So you hitting me right here today.
I ain't gonna do that. I ain't gonna do that.
Look, you see it a lot. They talk about it a lot in the in South Carolina culture, the Geechee Gullah culture, because they still have a lot of that culture that they have preserved, very well there. And a lot of that you will see, people in the language in New Orleans, and even in Mississippi. I think even people who live in North Mississippi have a different lingo from the people in South Mississippi, because we are, like I said, Natchez we are coined this a little easy. New Orleans is the big easy. I mean, we were first, and we have so similar backgrounds here. Being where we are located.
Well, it doesn't look similar when you pull into the downtown area. It looks similar. It's like you said, the bigger and just a smaller version. When we were driving in, I was like, wow, this looks very similar.
What did they introduce you to in Natchez? Where did they take you?
What?
Did they take you?
I don't think she went on.
Did you go to the black side of town, or did you go all over town?
We came on our own. I had watched the documentary, and then I said to my honey, I need to go to Natchez and find the Devil's Punchbowl. That's literally how it happened. And so before I knew it, he had set everything up for us to come. So we literally came on our own, and we did some exploring on our own. And I told him I wanted to come back. So one thing that I've been talking to Jarita about, the fact that I'm as soon as we can get an ease up on the pandemic, I absolutely plan to come back. I've been working on some other things behind the scenes that I'll be talking to you all about. But I did not have the chance to dig in the way I want to dig in. I'm coming back, and I'm coming with a camcorder.
Let me give you this right quick, and a lot of people might not want to talk about it, but Natchez had and Natchez really had a bodillas in.
They had a what?
Bodillas. It's a French word, bodillas.
Now, what is that, Mr. Jones?
It's a house of ill repute.
A house of what now?
Ill repute.
The house of Henry Pugh?
No. Let me give it to you in plain ease. It was a W house.
Oh, well, you all had the documentary about the lady that had the pleasure.
But that's over in the civil rights before he go into that. But,
I could get you started with that too.
Natchez still has the only single standing slave dwelling in the state of Mississippi here in Natchez. It's called Concord Quarters. Yes. And it's on Gayosa Street, who was the Spanish governor, Gayosa. And the back of it, the forks of the road, the creek ran right up to the back of it. And it is owned by an African-American woman, Miss Deborah Cozy, and is a bed and breakfast home. So, like I said, Natchez has, rich. They say where the river runs and the history runs even deeper.
Amazing.
Like I say, we'll let Dad tell you, because we come from forks of the road, Civil War, up to civil rights. And even though we laugh about that in the story, I always say, follow me to Nellis. She played a huge and significant role in civil rights here.
I saw her documentary, so I'm eager to talk about that.
You seen the documentary, right?
Yes, sir.
She was a black lady, but she was a very eloquent lady.
Mm-hmm.
She read up, and that's French word bodilla. That's so keep that bodilla. So keep that. Bodilla.
But Natchez, even though, like I said, we had, I think Natchez too had was the place that had the most free slaves to live in a city or a town or a settlement. So it's crazy. We were the richest town for slavery. Let's just say cotton was king, but we were also the town that had the most free, people of color to dwell in. So that just kind of somewhat was ahead of his time on it. And then when we got to the cusp of civil rights, I think that there were some major things here that we, had been dealing with for, a while. But just coming from the era of slavery up to civil rights, it was just basic, human rights things. And like I said, it's strange because these are the same people who, in most instances, probably are people in your family that you then come to a point due to the times had issues, with. But one of the major things that happened here was the Parchman ordeal. And there is a documentary out there about it. Natchez was started here. We had the NAACP started in
50. I think the NAACP was started in 1955. I think.
55, and they held, it was helped, some of the board members and things were Mr. John Banks, who was one of the first Black doctors here in Natchez, and he was one of the people that helped start the Mississippi Surgical Center. And so they hosted meetings there at his home, and they also hosted meetings over at a site that we hope to. There's some good talk with the city government about making civil rights structures over on the Woodlawn area at what was at Miss Mamie Mazeek's house. It was also the place that they had meetings for the White House, and the White House was a food establishment. So you see that throughout, history of civil rights. You had business owners who were really the people who were behind moving of the civil rights. And so Miss Nellie Jackson was one of those people who was a activist for civil rights, but she still had to abide and dwell in a community of what we would call the white man. She didn't service any African American.
Mm-hmm. Well, she didn't want her product tainted, of course.
She did. She did not. But she also knew about the power of a dollar. She also knew about She also knew about the power of having relationships. I think if she'd have been living today, she literally could have been the mayor of Natchez.
I think that she also knew the power of power, because running that house also put her in a situation where she had a lot of power over people who felt they had power over her. And so it's amazing how, to be honest with you, sex gives you power. And
she was well respected. It was a respected
Well,
home.
of course she was, because she was making people's lives better across all colors. Working for the NAACP on one end and servicing the leaders on the other.
But she was a community advocate. Never missed a time to donate to the cause or to give whatever it was that she could. The story of the Parchman ordeal is that in 1951, when they were going to go out to protest, to march, to go downtown, they left what is today Beulah Baptist Church.
I don't think it was in the 60s.
He gonna give me the correct year. Yeah. But they went to go to protest to march, and once they left Beulah Baptist Church to turn on Martin Luther King Street, the sheriff, who was
what transpired, there was protesting. They was going to protest march. And, as time the civil rights era was in turbulence, we had all kinds of bombings and stuff. So what happened is that the local elected officials decided that they was going to march down to City Hall. The mayor at that time and the police chief, which was J.P. Roberts, which later on became my boss man, they would stop at a certain point and told them that if they marched, they was going to arrest them. Mm-hmm. So what they did, they said, well, we're going to march, so you may as well go out and arrest. So they started doing, arresting people. Now at that time, the Natchez Police Department wasn't that big, and it wasn't really that big, so they didn't have enough jail space to put these people. So they took them to the city auditorium. They held them in the city auditorium for I don't know how many hours or whatever. So not being aware of what's going to take place or what was going on, like granted now, you had people that was in their 50s at the time, and 60s, and you had kids. Matter of fact, you had kids that was 8, 9, 10 years old in the march. So they decided, they're not knowing, they decided to arrest everybody. They called a bus down. Got a bus, Parchman, which is the state penitentiary, which is located in Sunflower County. Sunflower County. They loaded the peoples up and took these peoples to the Parchman Penitentiary.
They did let some of the children go home. They released them to other family members, but all the adults had to stay.
All the adults. What they did, once they got them in Parchman, they stripped these people naked. They put coal, they put water on them, and they gave them castor oil. No, did they have any tissue paper for them? That is what they did.
Can you pause for 1 minute? I just want to reiterate the part of the story because it was a little bit choppy. What they have shared with us today, Mr. Joe says that these people were protesting peacefully, and they took them. So they told them they were going to arrest everybody, and these were women, men, and children. Took them down to a gymnasium, made them stay there for a little while. Decided to release the kids and tell them, "Oh, you just go home to some family members," and took the men and women to jail to Parchman. If people are trying to figure out how you've heard that, last year, Jay-Z was supposed to be working to file a lawsuit against Parchman for the horrible conditions that still exist right now. Some of the worst conditions you've ever seen, inhumane conditions. And so he said that they stripped the people down naked and gave them laxatives and no tissue paper, so that they were basically using the bathroom all over themselves naked.
What they gave them, if you look at a roll of tissue paper, or blocks or one-ply paper.
But and the things like that are intentional. You know what I'm saying? Like, do you know how gruesome that is to do something? We talk about petty now. That is.
They were all in the same room. They were not in individual cells. All the men were over in one big cell, the women over in one big cell. They had to use the bathroom in front of each other. They could not hold it. A lot of times using it on themselves. And when they hose them down, if you see a picture of Parchman, they have very big windows. They open the windows up.
Open up.
And they suffer from hypothermia.
My mother-in-law is 80-some years old, and she went, and she still can remember exactly what transpired. She could tell you what happened, and right now today, those scars on the people that are still living, they still can remember exactly what transpired. And like I say, some of the kids today are grown and up in age and got children now. But that was one of the horrible things that they did to the citizens, the black citizens in the city of Natchez, and it's a stain on the city. And I think I don't know if they got some people got reparation, but then some didn't, because I think they filed a lawsuit. But I can't go to details because I really don't know.
At the 50-year anniversary of this atrocity, the city of Natchez, then city mayor, Mr. Bush Brown, offered a public apology from the city. And I know people saying it doesn't seem, like a lot, but the recognition of that there was a wrong.
Right.
It was a huge, huge step in the community. And we have a lot of ongoing conversations about righting the wrongs and different things in our community, and try to move forward. You can't forget, the history, can't erase it, but try to move forward with some of the things. But we did ourselves a disservice as a state when we took Mississippi government out of the school districts, because these are things that kids need to know about their own history. And if you don't have people like my dad and some of the other elders of the community to talk to, they don't know any of this history.
Miss Jackie, like Louisiana, no, it's not. Not Miss Jackie, Miss Nikki. Miss Nikki has asked several questions that we will come back to. For this question in particular, Miss Nikki, they put the same thing in Mississippi history books that they put in Louisiana's. Okay, then. And she's an educator and is working to rid us of this issue in Louisiana. But of course not, because this is the thing. When you start talking, when you make the statement about acknowledgement being the beginning of it, for Black people, this is really a large part of what we desire. Because if you at least acknowledge our pain, then we can stop invalidating the trauma that Black people have dealt with generationally, the disenfranchisement of us financially and socially, the fact that there are still laws today that continue to be put in place to prohibit our progress. You get light to the truth that this country has purposely oppressed and suppressed Black people for a long time. But to acknowledge it means that this country has then to be held accountable, and they refuse to take that accountability. You know, the words of Dr. Maya Angelou, "Still I Rise," said completely differently with me now. I used to love them then, but I love them even more now because despite the fact that our pain has failed to be acknowledged, we with each generation of Black people, we are seeking to do better than our generation before. And we're not talking about in terms of money and things like that, but how are we even overcoming the mental health trauma? Because we downplay that, but for what your grandmother went through, there's no way you can deny that it did not affect how she had to raise her children, what she had to think about at night, the worry, the panic she felt, having these things replay in your head. And Black people did not have a place where we could ever talk about these kinds of things. So
she will talk about it, but not really. For the first time it was told to me, it brought tears to my eyes. It made me fight and mad. But know what she said? It was just the times, and you had to forgive people. And I was like, baby.
I heard you said to such granddaughter. Come on.
Yeah. Let me say that was profound, you know, that and talking about testament to the strength of the elders of the community.
Let me I was reading some of the comments that somebody said. Let me go back to something
Brian, about Natchez College.
Someone just said that Natchez was the second oldest settlement on the Mississippi. Now that's what that was somebody type. But
I posted that one. Yes, sir.
We celebrated our centennial a year before New Orleans did.
Okay, so you were the first oldest. Okay.
I think we are the oldest.
You're the oldest, and then but you are the second largest. Is that what I was supposed to?
No.
Okay, so
Natchez is the oldest, the second largest slave trading market.
Okay, Natchez is the oldest slave trade market.
No.
No.
We are the oldest. We are the oldest settlement
on the Mississippi.
Oldest settlement. Okay.
Not city. We're the oldest settlement on the Mississippi River.
Okay. Then we talking about pre-construction.
Yeah.
We talking about before towns and cities were constructed to be what they were before.
Yeah.
You know, because you had Mississippi has 82 counties now, and it was 82 counties. Then there were territories and areas that you had, but you know,
we were the first capital of Mississippi now.
Yeah.
Your cousin said Natchez is older than Mississippi. So before the state was established, all of that was part of the Louisiana Purchase, right?
That's true.
And what he was talking about too is then we you know go on to talk about education here. I am a graduate of Alcorn State University, historical Black land grant institution, and my dad unfortunately went to Jackson State University. But we were home to Jackson State University here in Natchez, as well as Natchez College.
I saw that marker by the cemetery.
Natchez Seminary College.
Natchez Seminary College.
What it is, Natchez Seminary College. It was Natchez College, but as of today, it's still Natchez College is there, but it's no longer operational. But it's owned by the national. It's owned by the Baptist Association, Mississippi Baptist Association.
Okay.
So that's who owns it. It's not running. But on over a little further, Jackson State was on Cemetery Road, right around from the Devil's Punchbowl, not too far from Devil's Punchbowl, and by the city, the Natchez City Cemetery. That's where Jackson State University started out at.
We were also home to one time USM started here in Natchez as well, before they moved up to Hattiesburg. Um, so, like I said, Alcorn being named after Governor Alcorn, there, of course, land grants institutions, and the whole development of educating our African Americans was due to thanks to Hiram Revels, who was the first president of Alcorn. And so we've always been, like I said, we've had a lot of horrors, but we've always been fairly progressive. That's why today it kind of saddens me and my dad and the other leadership of the community are working so hard to develop economic development. Back here, we used to be a very industrious community. As you see, Natchez, Vicksburg, and all this were old slave towns, shall we say. And so we see a lot of the family still there, but a lot of things still, have not changed. And so I think real conversations need to take place throughout the state on how can we, change, these cities and towns. Vicksburg is growing, Natchez is moving, and we're growing, and we're doing some things different. But I think for us, really, addressing our past, addressing our, culture and our history and our heritage. People think those things are not important to what's actually really going on now. But if we don't address those things, when we fail to address those things, it really holds us back and serve as a hindrance for us to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think it relates so much to the issues that go on currently, because if you don't want to address the past, you also don't want to talk about those issues in the present. And what ends up happening is a lot of young Black folks, we see it here in Louisiana, leave and don't want to come back because there's not a real opportunity for them.
Mm-hmm.
We have to address those things. We have to talk about it. And honestly, I don't care what people say. I feel that there's still a cloud that hovers over these areas when we do not talk about it. And the South in general has to be more progressive about how you think about it. I talk about Louisiana still relying on an oil industry in a society that's technology based. After all the oil we've let these people drill and give them all these tax cuts, we have no money to move us into this era. But once again, when we talk about the muzzling of people, when we talk about not talking about race and culture in our state, those issues alone, I feel, keep us from moving forward as we should. So I fully agree with you, and I think that's an amazing question. At this point, we have been going at it for an hour and 20 minutes. And I just don't want to keep you all night, because I'll be honest, and Jarita knows this, I could go all day, so it's nothing but we've gotten on the phone and we're just going. But I respect the fact that you all probably have things to do. So what I would like us to do.
Excuse me. I don't have a job.
You can do this all day, Mr. Jones.
I can stay here with you all night.
He's retired, so I'm not.
I love it.
There was a lot of, like say, we started talking about schools and stuff and integration stuff. We really didn't get into it, and because, like I say, it's a lot of issues that we are facing in Natchez. I'm just gonna be truthful with you. We got some issues that are coming up soon, dealing with statutes and stuff. We finna address that, but I think people that look like us don't want to talk about it or don't want to take any action on it. So it's we got a lot we got a lot of things we need to do, because as when you go to these conferences like local elected officials, and I don't care where you go, and I've been to a lot of them, Pittsburgh, I've been Charlotte, North Carolina, I've been to Black National Conference, I've been all, but one thing that people need to realize and keep in mind about communities, no community is going to thrive or work without diversity. If you don't have diversity and inclusion, you're not gonna make it. So that is the problem with a lot of communities in America today. There's no diversity, and I try to explain to my colleagues, you can talk about doing one thing on one side of town and doing one thing on the other side of town, but if it's not for the good of the people or who you represent, is you defeat yourself. But diversity, and they tells you, all the people at the NLC, National League Cities, they tell you, diversity is the key. But we can't get the people in the community to see this, that understand it, especially young people. Some of the young people really don't know the history of what we've been through, our struggle. But see, young people ain't gonna take what we went through. They're not gonna take it, but they still need to understand what they're facing. Like I say, it's right now, and as you know, in all over America, we're in turbulent times when it comes to black and brown people.
Yes.
And I always talk to me and Dad have these conversations. Sometimes they even get heated. But the generational gap that we have, and I think that our generation of people are gonna have to be the people to bridge the gap between the younger generation and my dad's generation, because we have to help them to understand that you are standing on the shoulders of somebody else, and they have them to understand the importance of that.
That's it. Because one thing that tends to frustrate me, I was a high school teacher for 13 years. And I had to tell my students constantly, hearing them say things like, well, I wouldn't have taken it. I said, well, you weren't in that position. And you are only where you are now because people did take that for you. People did say, I would die today for my kids to have a better life. Because had the laws been the same, had we been still under Jim Crow, under slavery laws, you would have taken whatever you had to in order to survive. And so I think there's a lot to say also about humility, because we've gotten so full of ourselves off the backs of what our parents and grandparents have done for us that we think everything is about me, when we're really a product of the work and the sweat and the tears and the deaths of our ancestors before us.
I totally agree with you, and I try to educate everyone. I'm on a lot of local committees. I like that. I believe in having diversity. We can't move forward if we don't move together. But we do not. We don't really try to understand the things that our ancestors went through. And like I say, we can say I wouldn't have took that or I wouldn't have done that, but it is our duty and our civic duty for us to be involved in our communities. It is our duty to go out and vote whenever the polls are open. It is our duty to do whatever we can to help uplift the community. And everybody know the old African proverb: it takes a village, and we have gotten so far away from that. These are the things that were instilled in our parents, to where, like you say, we have gotten to where it's all about us, and we don't care about the next person anymore.
Let me say this too. Let's not lose focus. But you said something about Jim Crow. We're still under Jim Crow. There's nothing has changed. It's still the same, but it's just in another form and another fashion. And and like I say, being a what you call a baby boomer, I come on, a baby boomer. See, these kids now don't understand. I went to an all black high school. I went to an all black university, but it took me to do a little world travel to learn and how to deal with different situations. See, they never rode on a school bus that's saying, you ride a bus, say Natchez Adams County School District, separate but equal. They never had school books that been passed down to you, where the school book you went to, say, the Victoria Thompson. Your book that you had when you got this book over, you said Natchez High School. That was a white school. You had hand-me-down books. So we always been in a position whereby we always got hand-me-down. But it's always, we struggle through the cause, we made it. And like I say, we are, and I said it earlier, we are resilient peoples. We're going to make it. There's nothing in this world can hold back a black, beautiful person who want to make it in life. We're going to make it. And I'm going to tell you, and see, and I tell people, you know what else we need to do while we on here? We need to, and I love this man, and he's one of my favorite people. Dr. Cornell West, he tell the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
Dr. West is one man who lays it down his philosophy of things. Dr. West, I love him. I love the way he's done it because he's laying out everything that's dealing with the black community and the struggle that we've been through and the struggle that we've got to go through. As he stated, we may as well brace for the backlash because it's coming.
It's
Well,
definitely coming.
We had, like you said, we've been on here like an hour and a half. Does anybody have any questions specifically?
So I was about to say that's what I wanted us to try to get to would be these questions, so we can talk about some of those. All right, and look, if we need to schedule a part 2 in the future, we'll get together because I definitely want to make sure you share some of the things that people need to check out in Natchez. So we're gonna start with Miss Nikki's questions, and she's posted several. She said, "This is so timely. We are currently reviewing and revising our current social studies standards in Louisiana, and she's part of that team. And would love to incorporate some of the unknown facts into our revised curriculum. How do you propose we learn accurate information so that it is not misleading and won't be disputed as an opinion?"
Well, Dad's gone out of here, and he's a part of the local community school board where they, talk about issues and upcoming things. But I think it's so important for people like her to be a part of the conversation. It's hard for us to make sure that there is accurate information when we're not at the table. So thank you for just you being there and being a part of it. But making sure that we have the information that is going to be published in our book, making sure that I think more research needs to be conducted to find out, to make sure it's not one version. Right. As they always say, it's two sides.
Right now, that's what we get. We get one side right now.
We get one side of the story. And I wish that when we do history books for our state, that it really would be reflective of the trajectory of the community and not just one person's point of view or one racist perspective. So I think having more oral history, more things that are recorded from actual people who experienced those things, and so I would love to see some comparative stuff done, like that in the school district for students to interview these people. And I think that is the best way, or one way that we can kind of get those things done. They used to do a lot of field trips in school. I don't think they do those things anymore.
Nope, not as often. Not as often.
And so due to curriculum and studies, it's kind of hard to do that. But I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to do that is to make sure that we record and have these oral history stories recorded. Check with local universities; they do have some historian things going on. We do. I think it's Professor Ortiz out of Florida State. Florida. He's at the University of Florida. He comes here every year. He does oral history and communication stories. But I think for me, the best way to do that would be through storytelling those actual oral histories and taking that information to your state entities to request to have that in there. The development of our own curriculum gonna be one way to do that, and to petition the school districts in the state to use that information.
I think that there is more than enough information out there as well to already implement into the schools. We have more than enough research and books out there that are already verified information. The wider story of Dr. Martin Luther King, stop making the kids read I Have a Dream and let them read I've Been to the Mountaintop, that he delivered prophetically the day before he died. We have plenty of stories about plenty of movements and revolts that they will not discuss. They will not teach about Nat Turner and all these other things that are present but are not incorporated. And just like with any textbook, as you get updates, you do a new edition. So the biggest thing is put it in there. There's plenty out there that just has not been included. So that accuracy, I think, is the problem. The problem is getting them to buy into what is already out there and available. So I think that's a great question, though. So I'll bring you the next one. She said, what are your thoughts on reparations for the descendants of slaves? In favor of or not? And what would you expect reparation packages to consist of?
Let me say this. This is an ongoing thing on this reparations talk. Reparation is been going on for years and years. And this ain't, like I say, this something is not just not started, but
African Americans the only people
everybody that ever had anything done to them had reparation. Even much the Japanese, they was interned in the internment camp, they got paid. But the 40 acres and the mule, we haven't received ours. We haven't received ours yet. As I said earlier, we are some of the most oppressed people. We've been for 400 years. We've been 400 more years. We've been oppressed. But when it comes to talking about reparation, it's a no-no. For some reason, America hasn't treated us as treated as black citizens right, and as it look, if reparation come, it won't be in my lifetime. I don't think we're going to see it because, like I said, this is a very hot issue.
They can wipe out my student loans and give me 5 acres, and I'll be happy.
But that's one thing. As you said, one of the congressmen say, that's what it is. Reparation. They wipe out your student loan. That's not what. That's a form of reparation.
That gives us a leg up.
And so I think more conversations. I'm in favor of to within reason. Of course we gonna have to have it within reason, but I think things like that, conversations like that, it puts us on the right path. Like I say, I think Dad say I don't think it'll be in my lifetime either, probably, but I think that these conversations are needed. And like he said, we are the only race. I mean, really, we the immigrants. We not, of this state, who have never received anything. So I think that, like I said, these conversations are going to be ongoing, for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And so I think we have some leadership up in Congress that are trying to make sure that, we are moving in the right direction.
But we keep dishing out love, but we don't get it. We don't get it back.
Her camera out.
Take this now.
Give me no charger, please.
Your phone there?
Yeah, my phone.
How you gonna charge me?
We want to finish answering these questions. Hello.
Hey.
Hey. Okay. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. It just kicked me out. I'm so sorry about that. Sharing with you all, I was saying, blast much. If we can get a couple of, because with the Native Americans, I'm quite sure we want too much,
You
much more
breaking
than that,
up.
right? Once it kicked me out, I was telling the question. I'm breaking up.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Uh-huh.
What about now? Okay, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm gonna read off. I'm gonna read some of the questions because it appears that I lost some of them. I don't know what happened. So we'll look at the ones we do have. So I have no idea why it picked me out. So let's see. She says, "Do you think the past let it go mentality of our ancestors has traumatized later generations and caused some of the fear that Black people have other Blacks are speaking out or asking for change?" So, do you think that the let it go mindset has contributed to how people feel today?
Well, to be honest with you, the people's are people, but to let it go, it's hard to let something go when you are a race that don't know anything about your heritage or what's been done to you. So how you gonna let it go? They say, "Oh, that's in the past." I understand in the past, but well, we need to focus on the past and we need to focus on the future. But like I say, it's hard when you got black people don't don't know anything about themselves or where they came from or nothing.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
that's it's a double-edged sword. I'm not saying that this whoever asked the question is right or it was wrong because in a sense both of us could be right. But like I say, we are a people that are lost because a lost generation because we don't know anything about our people. As what's name said in one of his speeches, the man said, uh, why is your name Malcolm X? He said, why'd you name yourself Malcolm? He said, I named myself. He said, I put X at the end of my name because I don't know who I am or where I came from. That's why X is at my name in the end of my name.
I,
That was Malcolm X told one of his students. He was giving a speech. So what
I mean, and I think that um you can't really say
let it
let
go.
it go, you know, because everybody deals with things differently. I think we lost her again. Let's see. How you gonna get on the camera? Come on, man.
All right, let it go.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I don't know what is. I'm guessing it's my internet is all of a sudden it's just giving me news. So I'm very sorry about that. Um, we're gonna try to let me see if I can get them back in the room to talk. I'm very, very sorry, you guys. The internet has been down, but we get to the question segment and it's just not wanting to cooperate. So I'm gonna wait until they come in. In the meantime, I'll share some feedback and go to the next. Oh, there you are. There you are. Okay. You can unmute. I'm so sorry. I know it's
That's
my
okay.
internet because it kicked me out again, and it was like So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay. No, I just was
So
saying that people can't really try to tell you about your trauma. I mean, people can't really tell you about how you're supposed to feel. People can't, as they say, you got to walk a mile in my shoes. You can't really, tell me about how I'm supposed to feel about something. Trauma is uh, a generational trauma. It is embedded in our DNA. Um, it affects everyone differently. I just think how we choose to handle it and move forward with it is something that I think has changed, with the generations. I choose to be an active part of the change. I choose to be involved. I choose to be the person to help uh, to be an agent for change. That's kind of more my thing. If you don't get involved to be active in your healing process and then to be a active participant in the change, then you can't really expect to maybe receive what you need to get out of it. So I think that people should not have the attitude of, oh, just get over it. Yeah, we can't stay in that place, but it's not just something you just get over.
I think that the whole, we often say that our people had a let it go mentality, but it was a coping mechanism. If you sit there and allow yourself to fester in it, and it's your life every single day, it's the thing that still haunts you. It's exactly what you said. Until we're in that person's shoes, we don't know what it's like. We have still been equipped with the tools to do better going forward. So we have to take the good and bad. A lot of times I feel like we get so hung up in this era on saying what everybody did wrong instead of all the things that these people did right for us. All the things that they did put up with on our behalf. So for the next generation, I owe it to them to do better. So focus on the good. When you talk about letting it go, I think I fully agree with you. So the next question: how do we learn more about what our ancestors truly went through if they won't discuss it while they are living, and the textbooks and curriculum aren't teaching it? I think that depends on who your ancestor
Yeah,
is.
yeah, but that really does because well, see, if you got a lot of people, you got elderly people in your family. Why you just sit down, especially if you got someone in their 90s, 80s, and 90s. All you gotta do is sit down and start talking to them. And once you start talking to them, you'll find out a whole lot what they went through and what they did in life. But like I say, just ask them what's going on. Ask them about their folks. Ask them what's going on. I even much like to say, see what we got to start doing. The old people used to do it all the time, but they don't do it anymore. You know what they used to do, and it happened to me when I got married. The old folks used to ask you, "What's your name? Who is your folks? Where your
Mm-hmm.
folks from?" See that they had to go through a history before you even go to come see Miss Jane daughter or Miss Jane. They want to know who your folks were, where you from, and what plantation you come off, and all that stuff. See, that's how we learn a whole lot. That's how and 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 let me tell you something else. What people don't realize and what's going on. Now, my wife did it, and I always said I what you did. Do you know how you can keep a record of your history of your people? I'm gonna tell you how you keep a record of it. When you go to a funeral, get an obituary of your kin folks and save your obituaries of your kin folks. I had some cousins. My cousin in New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina came and destroyed everything that they had in New Orleans. They came here one day and we were sitting down talking. And I started talking, cousin, this. I went in the back room and pulled out all the obituaries from. And do you know what transpired? It's, oh, you got mama. They started crying. Said, I need a copy of it. I had to give them a copy because they lost records of they mom and dad. They it was because everything is on obituary. This is the daughter of such and such. They were born. This is he had this child. So what people don't know, you can keep a record of your ancestors, and I have them go back years of obituaries, 86, 96, go all the way back, and that's how I can trace my peoples and what happened to them.
It's so interesting that you bring that point up because I've been talking to my mom about us being able to dig back further because we cannot find a lot of information after my great grandfather, who I was actually blessed to grow up with. He passed away when I was 17 and he lived in our hometown. But we cannot really locate information about his mother or his siblings or his father. And so my mom pulled out the obituary of his first wife, and there we have basically a lot of clues about where we can go next.
Yeah.
You know, we would love for our people. There are some of our people who cannot talk about it because the trauma and the nightmares they've experienced far exceed the stuff we go through, and they didn't have a pill to help them get over that. They didn't have a counselor, somebody to talk to other than talking to each other, and they were really conditioned through slavery to not talk about it because you can't let this break you. You got to look strong. You have to be the mighty slave so that you won't get sold, so that you won't get beat. So, because of all these reasons. But what you said is so true, Mr. Joe, about the fact that there are pieces out there that we can use to find out more. And thank God for Ancestry.com because you can do a DNA test now.
Yeah. We do that. See, like I say, I see people when they go to a funeral now, they get the obituary, but they throw away. But see, when I get them, I take them, bring them home, and I put them up. But see, like I say, they don't understand. That's how you can trace some of your people going back in your history. Like I said, I got them going all the way back to I think the 70s, 80s, the 90s, and all the way back. We've been having them for years. My wife, granddaddy, my mother's, my aunties, and everybody. Because my grandmother had 18 children, and so I all of my folks on my side, they lived to get up in age. I had two uncles die last year. One was 98, one was 99. So
Miss Mayberry made a comment about Pastor Betty K know all about it, and my dad and the Pastor Betty K, which is my spiritual leader, they grew up all in the same neighborhood. And her father was a civil rights activist here in the town. So we have plenty of people who were part of civil rights, who grew up in the civil rights era, and we are working to try to develop a civil rights tour. For all the history that we have, we need to have a tour to where we can tell that side of the story. So, like I say, we got some things in the works and some things that people should be some must-sees when they come back to Natchez. We have our Proud Take a Stand monument here, the Parchman ordeal, where you can go and see those names of the people who were taken to Parchman. And of course, if you ever get to come, we're working on it. At us at Natchez Heritage School of Cooking, where we tell stories on the plate. We talk about the roots and history of soul food dishes and how our enslaved Africans and Native Americans made those culinary contributions and other contributions to society, and how we can still see those things. As my dad say, I think I'm conditioned to be kind of like the old folks. When I meet people, I tell them I'm like the
Okay, so I think they froze this time. You know what? I guess we've been going too hard tonight. So the internet wants to give us the blues first on my end, and then my end suddenly started knocking out all of the kinks, and now it's on their end. So obviously we've done something right tonight by sharing this knowledge and sharing this empowerment. So I'm gonna give them a few minutes to get logged back in, and I'll talk in the meantime. The hope is that you have been able to learn some things that you can use as you go forward to research more Black history and Black culture. The plan in the future is to be able to go back to Natchez to visit and to explore more thoroughly. I'm also working on another project that I will be reaching out to Jarita and Mr. Joe about. And so I cannot wait because I feel there's so much more that we need to know. And because Louisiana and Natchez are and Mississippi are so close in location, we've got to talk more about these things. As a part of the Black intellectualism movement, we will not just be talking about, finances and what's going on right now and and medical practice and things like that, we will also talk a lot about history. And so I hope that you all will continue to join into these discussions. You will share this information with others. You will encourage them to come in to this group. If you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please, 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 by all means, go subscribe to our YouTube channel, because on there you will be able to see replays of these discussions. Because if this is your first discussion tuning in, this is actually about discussion number 6 for us. So if you have not been able to tune in to the other discussions and you would like to see them, you can subscribe to our channel. You can see those discussions and you can actually get the notifications from when we will be going live again. If you are new to this, you can also follow my page and you'll get to see the notifications for more discussions that are to come in the future. We have our next discussion coming up on the 14th next week, when we'll be talking with accountants about all of the financial changes and advantages that are on the market for you. On the 15th, we'll be talking to Black doctors in Texas about the Black intellectualism movement, where our mission is not just to talk about Black people among Black people, but to bring the knowledge, talents, and gifts of us to the world. Because we do so much to empower and uplift others, but there are so many people and achievers out there that society does not know about. And so the goal is to continue to bring people together where we can share this with the world. She said that they have lost us on Facebook. But she said that please follow her. This is from Jarita. Please follow her on Facebook and Instagram. And you can also call her for a personal tour, which I will be doing. And you can also call her to ask about those cooking classes. They have some amazing things going on in the future. I'm going to talk to her again about doing a second session, because it was absolutely so amazing and so fulfilling. And of course, you guys know that I do not leave without sharing a poem from you. For you, that I think relates to our topic of tonight. And so today I went all the way back to my first book, which is Tear Stained Dresses and Dusty Shoes. That's right. I'm celebrating 10 years this year since I published this book. And I am going to read for you a poem I wrote called We Reap the Pride. And I think that this part is so important with us because this poem reflects so many of the things that we discussed today, and a mindset that I hope we can take with us going forward. For those of you who posted questions that we did not get to answer, I will share a response, and I will also tag Jarita. So if she would like to come back and share some responses, she can as well. She is there still in the comments, so you can chat with her right now if you'd like to. And she has some parting words from Mr. Joe that I will share after the poem, okay? We reap the pride. I hear the whip crack. I see you pick the corn. I see you rising at the earliest of morn. I see you look at a family that may not last. I watch you dress the master's children and watch them go to class. I see you try to read the Bible, but you can't understand the words. I see the tears fall, asking God if your prayers are heard. But I see your lips pursed, silent, yet bold. I see you working in the fields of the hard winter's cold. I hear you cry to God to take the pain away. Then I hear you say, okay, when he tells you not today. He told you he had a plan. In him, you had to trust. He wanted you to suffer so he could prepare for us. You were looked down upon, called ignorant and dumb, but I crown you all geniuses. Look at the battle you've won. And now I want to say thank you because you did it all for me. You lived this rough life so that I could be free. No amount of money could repay a people so brave, but I salute and thank you. I am another life you have saved. I think it's imperative that we look at the past and reflect on those journeys, but that we also remember that had it not been for the sacrifices of our people, we would not be where we are today. If you are in Louisiana, Natchez is only a short drive away, and I definitely encourage you to go and learn more about our history, and to even find out if your family's name is on that plaque at Forks in the Road. I thank you guys for joining us tonight. And as always, if you are wondering how you can continue to support me and my son and the work that we do, remember that my newest book called Treks is on Amazon. You can order your copy today as I work to continue to share, empower, and enlighten others about the experiences, the lives of Black people historically and currently. I thank you guys for logging in tonight and being here with us. Parting words from Mr. Joe. He says to us, you can't know where you are going if you don't know where you are coming from. It is essential. Thank you all for joining tonight, and I hope to see you again on next week. Take care.